Welcome to Bedtime Stories for Night Owls. Tonight's story is The Magic Cure by L.C.Ockenden. One very warm summer morning, Mr. Bumbletoes woke up with a terrible pain in his inside. Oh dear, he exclaimed. I must be very ill. I must go at once to see Dr. Tweedlecup. So he began to dress, giving a groan every now and then to make sure he was still ill. In a short time he was off down the road to Bimbleton to see the famous doctor. Dr. Tweedlecup lived in the best part of the village. The house stood back from the street, so that it had nothing to do with the shops and public house. On the gate was a large brass plate reading, Maurice Tweedlecup, M.D., B.S. Eden, physician and surgeon. Hours 9 to 11 a.m. and 6 to 8 p.m. Other times by appointment. Surgery round the corner. Mr. Bumbletoes read the brass plate from beginning to end once again, for he had often read and admired this brass plate, and then trotted round the corner to the surgery. The surgery was really a shed where the famous doctor used to keep his bicycle. But now he had put in a small table and 6 kitchen chairs. On the table he had put several papers and magazines that he'd collected from time to time from the railway station. Inside, Bumbletoes found Mr. Smith and Mrs. Jones already waiting. They both looked very gloomy, and poor Bumbletoes felt his pain coming on worse and worse. He had half a mind to call back another day when it was not so bad. But after all, he thought, better get it over with. So he sat down and began to stare at his feet. Then he heard voices at the front door, followed by heavy footsteps down the passage. The door of the surgery opened, and Dr. Tweedlecup put his head round and shouted, "Next!" Up jumped Mrs. Jones and followed the doctor inside. "He's a terrible man," said Mr. Bumbletoes as the door closed again. But he is a wonderful doctor," replied Mr. Smith, looking at Bumbletoes over the top of his glasses. "He cured the baby elephant at the circus in no time. Just gave him a box of pills to be taken at bedtime, and when the keeper's back was turned, the elephant swallowed the lot, box and all, and after that he was quite all right. Look at me," he continued. "Why, only a month ago I could hardly walk because of my rheumatics, and now I can skip like a 2-year-old." "Well, what are you coming for now?" inquired Mr. Bumbletoes. "The doctor says I'm growing too fat, and so he's giving me exercises. You see, I wouldn't do them by myself, so the doctor made me come and do them on his lawn. He's very strict." Mr. Smith was interrupted by the sound of Dr. Tweedlecup's voice outside. "And remember," he was saying loudly, "no butter, lard, cheese, eggs, margarine, dripping, suet, and no more acid drops. Remember, no more acid drops, Mrs. Jones. Good morning." Back he came down the passage. "Next!" he roared, and up jumped Mr. Smith. "Ah," said the doctor. "Good morning, Smith. As fat as ever? This will never do. Out in the garden, take off your coat and waistcoat and your shoes. Now, jumping on the spot by numbers. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hurry up, never mind the stones. Up in the air, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2. Heels raised, knees bend, kicking out by numbers. 1, 2, 1, 2. Back straight, don't curl up like a beetle. Keep on your toes. 1, 2, 1, 2. Mr. Bumbletoes was very interested. He stood on a chair and watched through the open window. Then the doctor happened to look his way and saw him. "Come on," he shouted. "Come on and join the exercises. It will do you good. Fall in behind Smith. Never mind your hat. Now, quick march. Walking on the toes. Begin." And off he went again. 1, 2, 1, 2. For 10 minutes, Smith and Bumbletoes ran, jumped, and skipped about the garden. Poor Bumbletoes was out of breath by this time. Then the doctor pulled out his gold watch from his pocket and glanced at it. "Good gracious," he said. 10 o'clock. Class, halt! Dismiss!" Mr. Smith just picked up his shoes and his coat and waistcoat and ran off home. Bumbletoes felt that his pain has now gone and thought he would do the same, but the doctor spotted him. "Hi!" he shouted. "No running off. Come inside and let's look at you." So Bumbletoes followed the doctor inside. "Ah, said Tweedlecup. "Sit down. Let's take your temperature." He picked up his red ink pen, shook it on the carpet, and pushed the wooden holder into Bumbletoes' mouth. "Now," said the doctor, "we'll write it all down. Where's my pen? Well, it will have to be in pencil. Name, Mr. Bumbletoes. Age, how old are you?" Mr. Bumbletoes could not answer without dropping the pen, so he made a gurgling noise. Dr. Tweedlecup looked up. "Good gracious, whatever are you sucking that pen for? I put the thermometer in your mouth. Dear me, that's my best pen you're chewing on, too." And he came round to Mr. Bumbletoes and took it out of his mouth. "Ah," he said, looking at the pen nib, "you must have some of my pills." He opened a drawer and pulled out a large pill box. "Here you are. One to be swallowed after every meal. Don't come back when you're better. I only treat invalids. Good morning." Dear, I am late." And out he rushed with his black bag. The next moment he was pedaling off down the street. A minute later he was back again. "And remember," he called out, "no more ice creams. Not one." And off he went again. So back Mr. Bumbletoes went with his pills, and when he got home he opened the box. There were only 3, but they certainly were rather large pills, and of a pinkish color. After dinner he decided that he was feeling better without the pills, but it's very hard to be quite certain, and of course the doctor would ask him if he had taken them. As he was a little afraid of the doctor, he thought perhaps he ought to take one at least. He took one out of the box and then tried to swallow it, but it was much too big to go down smoothly. It simply stayed in his mouth. So he tried pushing it down with a tablespoon, but each time it bobbed up again in his mouth. At last he managed it. He stood on the chair and looked up at the ceiling. Then he pushed the pill down with the end of the spoon, and just at that moment he jumped off the chair. It certainly seemed a big lump inside, but after a time it disappeared and his pain grew less and less. When tea time came, his pain had quite gone. It was undoubtedly a wonderful cure, but there was no need to take another after this meal. Then, at 6 o'clock, who should come tearing up to his house but Dr. Tweedlecup. The pedals of his cycle were flying around, and his black bag was rattling away in the carrier. "Hi!" shouted Dr. Tweedlecup before he had reached the door. "Those pills I gave you, what have you done with them?" "I've taken one, and now I'm perfectly well," said Bumbletoes, beaming brightly. "Well, I never!" roared the doctor, and started to laugh so loudly and deeply that the windows rattled. "That beats the band. So you're cured, eh?" And he roared again. "Yes, doctor, thank you, though I had rather a job to get the pill down." "I should think so!" exclaimed the doctor, and between his peals of laughter, "Why, they were some of the pills I prepared for the elephant." "For the elephant?" gasped Bumbletoes, beginning to feel ill again. "What shall I do, doctor?" "Do?" said Tweedlecup. "Why, nothing at all. They were only extra large peppermints dipped in cochineal. All you had was indigestion. Too many ice creams, I expect. Well, I'll have the other 2 pills back, and my fee will be 3 and 6. Good evening." That was how Mr. Bumbletoes was cured of his pain. The end. Sweet dreams, night owls.